Resistance to Antisemitism in the UK Green Party. Reflections on the political resistance from within the UK left, with Elise Benjamin and LCSCA's Yvonne Maxwell. This seminar will focus on the changes in left-wing party politics that led to problems of antisemitism in the Labour Party, primarily during Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, how these problems have more recently transferred to the Green Party, and how that has impacted on Jewish members. Their discussion will cover the changes Elise has seen since she joined the Green Party in 1988 to the current situation where a motion that states Zionism is racism is due to be debated at the spring conference. Elise will discuss the resistance to this motion and how it's being received within the party. Yvonne will also reflect on her observations of antisemitism in the Labour Party. Elise Benjamin has been a member of the Green Party since 1988 and has held many local and national roles, including as a national spokesperson, media officer, chair of the Association of Green Councillors, and international coordinator, working with Green parties around the world. She served as a city councillor in Oxford for 15 years and was the first Green and the first Jew to be Oxford mayor. She is a founder member of Jewish Greens and is also a member of UK Friends of Standing Together Greens, Greens Ukraine Solidarity, and Greens for West Papua. Her biggest political regret is not getting the 0.4% extra votes needed to be elected as a Green MEP in the 2019 European elections. Originally trained as an architectural model maker, Elise had a career change working as a senior administrator mostly in academia and the third sector, including as a regional officer for 2 Green MEPs. She retired in 2025. She is currently on a UK Friends of Standing Together National Committee and is a director of the Free West Papua campaign. She has been an active campaigner against anti-Semitism, mostly on social media, since 2016. Yvonne Maxwell is head of volunteering at LCSCA. She was a member of the Labour Party from 1980 to 2025 and served for 7 years as an elected local councillor, including 3 years as a local cabinet member. She has always considered herself left-wing and opposed anti-Semitism, sexism, racism, and homophobia. She stood down as a councillor in 2024, unhappy with the responses of her fellow councillors and party members to the 7th of October massacre. She feels politically homeless, but wanted to play a role in fighting anti-Semitism. She attended the 2025 Contemporary Anti-Semitism Conference in London, which led to her working at the LCSCA. She is critical of the lack of support for Jewish people and the failure to challenge anti-Semitism within the left after the 7th of October, and believes strongly that non-Jewish individuals need to speak up and be allies in the fight against anti-Semitism.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of informally interview Elise and get her to tell us a bit about how she's found the changes in the Green Party since she joined back then, and the current issues that there are around the anti-Zionism motion. So Elise, do you want to? Oh, I just wanted to also say there will probably be different opinions in this seminar, and we, as a centre, we welcome people, challenging, debating. But if we can just keep that respectful, and so we can have a really good debate if there is, around this issue. I will interview Elise and then open it up for some questions. So Elise, can you start off by talking a bit about what the Green Party was like when you first joined?
Well, when I first joined and up until a few years ago, it was lovely. I mean, no political party is perfect, but because of the very strong ethos within the party, that we've got a written philosophical basis that very, very heavily focuses on peace and human rights and social justice and equality and all of that. We have a code of conduct that talks about how members treat each other with respect. We so it was nice. And that's what it was like. I mean, we hadn't, a couple of us had been talking for years about, what, decades actually, do we set up a Jewish Greens? Do we need to? And we never felt we needed to until 2018, when we finally set up Jewish Greens. But we were absolutely welcomed in the party. Huge support, lots of collaboration with other special interest groups within the party, like the LGBT group and the Young Greens, but very much on board. So it's actually only in the last few years, 2024, I think, was when things really began to change.
And I think you said before that there was a very good policy that the Greens had on anti-Semitism, and that there was a bit of a move to remove that.
So the actual policy on anti-Semitism was in the racism policy, which has been there for years.
Mm,
What we had, which was worked on for a few years and eventually passed in 2021, was an internal guidance document as part
mm,
of the ethics framework of the party. So that framework has guidance on queerphobia, on Islamophobia, on anti-Semitism, and the anti-Semitism document, which was I was involved in drafting with other members of Jewish Greens. It's a fairly comprehensive document. It draws from different definitions and writings about anti-Semitism because no one definition covers everything.
mm, mm,
And it includes a briefing that helps members understand how to use it. And the purpose of it is for internal use. So
mm,
I spoke to the motion at the conference where it was passed, and we were very clear. It had two roles. One role was around education, which included helping members to understand when something is anti-Semitic,
mm,
but also helping our disciplinary process to understand when something is anti-Semitic. And then we were very clear that it would also help members to criticize the Israeli government without straying into anti-Semitic language.
mm. Do you feel that when was that actually passed, and do you feel it
So
actually worked well?
yeah, I mean, it was originally tabled actually by a non-Jewish member, working with Jewish members because he saw things beginning to shift from the
Mm,
outside, and he drafted something in 2018. But we had a tiny number of opposition. At that point, it would be about five members who were opposing it. And they threw lots of spanners, which confused the conference. So we went off and we decided to do a better draft, and COVID got in the way a little bit. So it was passed in October 2021. We got a standing ovation. I missed my train because so many people wanted to hug me because they were so excited. And by then we had been working during COVID on collaborating on with other groups within the party on member meetings about important issues around equality and diversity. So those were the glory years, really.
mm, mm. What's changed then, and is that policy still in place, and would it be something you feel that you could use now,
The
or do you
guidance
feel
is,
it's
yeah,
under threat?
the guidance is still there. There was a motion submitted to the last conference to try and remove the guidance, but it didn't reach the conference floor because it wasn't high enough priority for members, thankfully. But it was quite troubling because the people who were proposing it weren't Jews, and they wouldn't talk to Jews about
What
how
what
to
was their
understand the
reasoning?
guidance.
What was their reasoning
Um,
for removing it?
their reasoning, fundamentally, the reasoning was that it silenced criticism of Israel, but it doesn't. I mean, you only have to look at the party's
Mm,
social media to see that that's not true. And we
mm,
were very clear explaining why it doesn't when it was passed.
mm,
So there's this old kind of argument that you keep on hearing, like fundamentally it's rooted with the IHRA. It stops us criticizing Israel. No, it doesn't.
mm,
There's
mm,
absolutely
mm,
zero evidence that it prevents. The only time it prevents is if you don't understand the guidance.
mm,
I mean, that's
mm,
ultimately what we were saying.
mm,
So, but it was very clear that the proposers hadn't read it
mm,
and weren't willing to listen, and which is that was a big shift. Thankfully, it didn't reach the conference floor. I have
mm,
to say that was my 67th conference, because they used to be twice yearly,
mm.
and that was the first time that we had a safe space that Jewish members could go to if they needed to. We'd never needed that in the past, ever.
Right. So what's happened between now and then, do you think? What have been the main changes in
Well,
tone?
so the
Uh,
shift began earlier in 2024. After October the 7th. As we know,
mm,
everything really shifted after October
mm,
the 7th.
mm,
After October the 7th, the party issued a really balanced statement that called for the
mm,
release of hostages, condemned Hamas,
mm,
and called for a bilateral ceasefire.
mm,
It was a really balanced statement, and that statement stood, and there was a pride behind that statement.
mm, mm,
And then things started to shift, the language started to shift. So suddenly it was, we need to boycott the arts and sports without any understanding or attempt to understand that that would probably hit the left wing in Israel and that would
mm,
very likely hit a lot of non-Jewish Israelis.
mm,
So that was the party shifting away from strategic boycotts to
mm,
just let's boycott everything. And then some members, newer members' language changed, and that became uncomfortable. And there was more, as we've seen in the wider kind of left movements and environmental and peace movements that I've been involved in all my life. There's a shift to excusing problematic language or
mm,
not willing to listen to the fact that some organizations have leaders who've said some pretty problematic things. So that was where I noticed the shift, and that was began in around about February 2024,
mm.
and
I
it's
mean, I think my
increasing.
my experience in the Labour Party is that after 710, I was quite shocked that there was very little, and that I mean, today I actually had a little look on some of the, not Labour Party, but the other left groups, what they're saying at the moment. And I saw two papers online that had no mention of the arson attack. But I found the another paper on 7th of 10th, 23, that had two articles celebrating it. I actually did challenge their members about it, and they said that didn't happen. And I said, well, it's in print. But it's really interesting that I noticed straight after 710 there was almost right, let's go and pick it. You know, this is resistance. And I think I found, I don't know if you found it in the Green Party, but I found it quite shocking across the left. People either being silent or denying it or talking about context. And
Or
even today, I've seen people saying, oh, Mossad did the arson attack, it's false
yeah,
flag. And
because
it's
we're
quite worrying,
everywhere.
those the anti-Semitism mixed with conspiracy
Yeah,
theories.
and I've actually seen some members now using the Epstein colonizers. So Epstein is the latest veiled
Mm,
word for
mm,
Jew.
mm,
And do they really think we're that stupid that we don't know the
mm,
language?
mm, mm,
So it's shifting, but it's that willingness that I don't understand, that willingness to accept what are really conspiracy theories.
mm, mm. Well,
And it's people who used to be really thorough about where they got their information from.
I mean, I think there's a mix, and I think social media has amplified
Mm,
this. That people are in
absolutely.
bubbles, and but I found that anytime I've tried to challenge people, they tell me no, it doesn't exist. Even when I can document stuff I've seen on, pictures on social media and stuff like that, or demonstrations. And it almost seems like people can't look at it nuanced. So if you say, why aren't we speaking up about the Iranian protesters, you then get, oh, Trump's awful. And yeah, there's two different issues here. And I don't know how you're finding that in the Greens particularly, but it feels it's very unsophisticated. And it
It's
is linked,
yeah, I
that
mean it is, and it's I mean I'm seeing I'm active in the Green Party Ukraine support groups. My
mm,
grandfather was from Ukraine, so it kind
mm,
of it resonates with me. And some of the people who've been involved in that group have been talking about Putin in a positive light.
mm, mm,
They don't get very far, thankfully. And
mm,
in the pre-conference workshop for the emotion on Ukraine, there was overwhelming support. So,
mm,
but
mm,
there are the fringes who we, as in sort of members of Jewish members of the Green Party, were watching from the outside
mm,
when
mm,
they were in Labour, and
mm,
quite relieved after Corbyn was no longer leader that we didn't get an influx of those people, but we have had now. And I think that's
mm,
the bit
mm,
that really worries me because I'm seeing loads of people saying, I've joined the Greens, and they've got hashtag it was a scam and
mm,
so on. And that's a big trigger for me because
mm,
I don't just know have a lot of friends who in the Labour Party who were direct victims of anti-Semitism from Labour
mm,
members, but
mm,
I witnessed it myself, and
mm,
I was attacked for calling it out.
mm,
So I absolutely know it exists. And I think what horrifies me even more is we're talking about people who, if a non-white person said they'd had experienced racism, the response
mm,
would be, oh, that's terrible. Do you want to talk about it? I'll understand
mm,
if you don't.
mm,
If
mm,
a Jew says they've experienced abuse, the response is prove it.
mm, mm.
And that's been bubbling under for years.
Mm, mm,
And I hadn't realized how long until actually one of the things I did was I read Dave Rich from CST. I read Dave's
mm,
book
mm,
on the left's Jewish problem, and it what it does is it catalogues where the shift was. Because when
mm,
I remember my friends in the early 80s, they'd finished their A levels and then they weren't Jewish and then they'd go off to a kibbutz.
mm, mm,
And how did it shift?
mm,
Um, so it's been drip, drip, drip for years. But the horrific thing is seeing people who are meant to be all about peace and bridge building
mm,
and equality, not applying that to Jews.
mm. And I said, and easily slipping in to using the anti-Semitic tropes. And I
Yes.
suppose what bothers me quite a lot, and I wonder what you think about that, is it's wrapped in a flag of progressiveness. It's almost
Yes.
like progressive anti-Semitism, which obviously can't be a thing. And then if you challenge what they're doing, then you are reactionary. I mean, my politics haven't changed, but how I'm perceived has.
Yes.
You know,
Absolutely.
people not talking to me anymore, but quite honestly, I don't want to talk to them with some of the views. But there is that, it's very rigid, the thinking as well.
It is.
You
Yeah.
can't, I find it really
It's
hard
very
to debate
similar.
with people.
I find it very similar in attitude to when I tried to engage with people about Brexit. They'd made up their mind.
Mm,
That was it.
mm,
They weren't going to listen
mm,
to the truth, no matter how much evidence.
mm, mm,
But it surprises me who it's coming from.
mm,
And I think that's the bit, yeah, that's the bit that's most horrendous.
mm. No, no, I mean, I agree. And I think I've gradually, there was ones that I sort of, okay, they're, all my ex-comrades and that. But now I'm seeing people that I thought a bit better of who are being silent or allowing some really
So when you
anti
sit in
stuff.
a fringe meeting run by
Mm,
PSC at a party conference, which is what happened in 2024, and the fringe meeting has a panel of people who are using terms like martyr,
mhm,
that is not a word that I would ever have expected to hear
mm, mm,
within in a meeting within any organization that is founded on the principles of peace and anti-war.
mm,
But it wasn't, that was the word I remember. But someone came up to me afterwards and said, and he was wearing a keffiyeh, and he said that meeting was a recruitment for Hamas. That's how he viewed it.
mm, mm,
But people didn't bat an eyelid. I mean, apart from a
mm,
few of us, and it shocked me. It really shocked me. And I think that was the next shift, if you like, that
mm, mm,
acceptance of that kind of
mm.
language.
So what is the debate like at the moment in the Green Party coming up with this resolution? How's it uh
I'm getting a sense that this one might be pushing things too far. That there are people who I know who were involved in Greens for Palestine for a long time who are uncomfortable. I'm
mm,
aware of that, and I'm getting the same from other people. I was actually in Greens for Palestine, but I was one of a group of Jewish members that were thrown out 2 years ago. We were wrongly accused of Islamophobia, which I find deeply, deeply offensive, and then thrown out. And that includes Jewish members with Muslim spouse.
mm, mm,
But it was just because for me, someone literally just asked, how can we talk about what's happening in Gaza without being anti-Semitic? Which I thought,
mm,
brilliant.
mm,
And I responded, and then I got a wave of abuse, and then I got thrown out of the group. Um, and that was another kind of shift to not listening,
mm,
talking
mm,
over. The only Jewish members I know who are still in the group I don't think participate much. So,
mm,
so that kind of emboldened some people
mm,
within that
mm,
group. But I am hearing that they have gone too far this time.
mm,
I'm also gradually hearing through networks, and I've got a lot of networks because I've been in the party for so many years. People who are really worried and upset and don't know what
mm,
to
mm,
do.
mm,
We have a problem because we've got the big anti-racism march in London on Saturday. So a lot of people are kind of, well, they want to go to that, but they want to be at the conference to stop the motion going through. So
mm,
it is difficult.
mm,
A lot of the people who are really vocally gung ho for the motion, have been pretty offensive online,
mm, mm. Do
um,
you, I mean,
uncomfortably so.
do you find that the language is slipping from saying, oh, we're just criticizing Israel to actually the mask really slipping? Because
Yeah,
I'm seeing quite a lot of that now on the demonstrations that they're not even pretending. I mean, one thing that really I saw and I posted about, and I was told should be ashamed of myself because it was in the Telegraph, was about a member who was voted in on the Your Party Executive Committee. And they'd done the whole conspiracy thing, but they'd also complained about, apparently there's some Netflix Jewish program about Jewish couples, something like, I don't know it, but they were saying, oh, this is just promotion for Jewish people. And it was, they weren't even pretending. They were
No, they
actually not
don't.
even using the word anti-Zionist. And I put that up and I was told I was spreading propaganda. And then they started ranting about Trump in Netanyahu and then saying I should be ashamed. And I sort of said, well, can you tell me? Is what they're quoting this woman said true? And if it is, don't you have a problem with that? But they just then disappeared. But this person was on Jeremy Corbyn's slate. And I suppose I better just put my hand up here. I was always part of that, not him particularly, because I didn't really know him that much. But I was very much part of the Labour Representation Committee, the left of the party. And I supported Jeremy Corbyn until I started to see what was going on. But where I was a councillor was there was a very strong support for him, and he actually did come and canvass for me. So, I better admit that before people see it on my social media. But when I started to be more critical, that's when I was basically, you can't question it. It's the right, it's weaponizing. And I was just, but why aren't we believing Jewish people? You would believe a black person or a woman, you'd hope. And it just feels like there's no pretense with some elements at the moment.
So when were you a councillor?
2017 until April 24.
Okay.
So I've 7 years a councillor, 3 in the
Yeah.
cabinet there.
So
But
I did 1999 to 2016 with a
mm,
2-year break. I knew
mm,
Jeremy Corbyn. We were on first name
mm,
terms. He
mm,
came and campaigned against me, and we were given feedback. I wasn't the only Jewish candidate standing for re-election.
mm,
And we were told by residents that they'd been told by Labour canvassers, don't vote for me, don't vote for the other candidates. We're Jews, the Green Party are a Jewish party.
mm,
So that was 2016. And it shocked me. But obviously, at that point, I wasn't experiencing what was going
mm,
on in the Labour Party. Only
mm,
I was seeing it from outside. So, I mean,
mm.
what did you experience? What opened your eyes?
Um, I mean, as I say, I used to be a member of the Labour Representation Committee. I sort of distanced and left that because there was there was a whole argument about some people who were being quite anti-Semitic and it wasn't being dealt with. But Jeremy Corbyn used to come along to their conferences, but he would always speak about South America, Central America. He didn't really talk about this. So that's all I sort of saw him do. Um, and, as I say, I wished I'd voted for Andy Burnham now, but I just saw more and more people making excuses. Oh, that's not what he said, or that's not what he did. And there was a small group of his friends who were Jewish that were very defensive of him and supportive. And for me, it was like, there's Jewish people telling me this, but I'm also hearing other Jewish people saying that. And it's like cognitive dissonance. And in the end, I thought, no, this is your defense. I mean, there was some particular people who did get expelled. I'm not going to name them, but they were pretty well known at the time. And he didn't deal with them. And someone said, oh, he's just weak. And I just, it's not an excuse. And yeah. So when I started to distance myself, that's when I was suddenly no longer part of the left. Momentum all came out and supported me for my by-election, but now I was, not part of it. And as I say, after 710, where I was a councillor, when there'd been things like, I think it's Pittsburgh, councillors we'd gone to, memorials, there was interfaith ones and everything like that. After 710, I didn't really hear anything. And I was like messaging, people in the leadership saying, aren't we going to do anything? And nothing really happened. I mean, there was statements, but very weak statements. And yes, I was sort of, then I started to speak up about it in our private Labour groups because there was a Green motion that wasn't very balanced. And we, as a Labour group, used to try and amend motions. And I sort of said, well, we need to be criticising Hamas and hostages and, those sorts of things. And I basically made a few enemies. And I don't really want to go into what happened, but that's why I'm not a councillor. And a few people, when I'd spoken up, said, "Oh, that's really brave. It's really good what you said." And then they just were cowards. And I think this is my real issue, I think, is that it's the people who look away who are cowards. And that's complicity in my book.
Yeah.
But I've seen it get worse since then, I think. I've had people, walk past me in the street and I just think, but it's quite worrying where I am, because it's an area where there was really good relationships between the mosques and the synagogues. It's got a very large Haredi community. It was, I'm not quite sure what it's like now there, but it was always somewhere where Holocaust Memorial Day, it would be multi-faith, all those sorts of things. But I mean, one example is in that area, there was a by-election in what is a mainly Haredi area. One of the canvassers was walking around, and she was a councillor, with a Palestine badge on. And I thought, this was like 2 months. This was December 2023, and she got away with it. And so it felt like people just didn't want to challenge it. They were quite scared, I think, because they saw me being attacked. So people were just cowards. And I just think the wider left, not everybody, but there are people who are just not. I get private messages sometimes from people saying, "Oh, it's really, I agree with you." And I think, well, yeah, why don't you say something? But there are people, I don't know if he's on here, and I'm not going to name him, but he's a Labour Party member who has has on Twitter was sharing the Workers' Party tweets that were quite anti-Semitic and getting attacked for it. So there are people, but it's a small group, I think, on the left. But, so I just wondered, is that any sort of similarities within the Greens?
No, I mean, my personal experience actually was watching the Labour Party from the outside. So at that point where it became public about the anti-Semitism, and my understanding was that border deputies and others had tried for a year to engage with Corbyn before they went public. To the point where it went public, things started to shift on Twitter. And that was my kind of main area was Twitter. And I saw people talking about their experiences in the Labour Party and then other people denying them. And I started to see all the nasty stuff happening. And that's what made me into a vocal campaigner against anti-Semitism. I ended up, I mean, there are numerous accounts that campaign and call out anti-Semitism, and I know all of them because, and in fact, that's where I first saw David Hirsch. It was on Twitter. That's how. So I know that's where I started to try and find out what was going on. And then linking in with friends of friends who are involved in different organisations. So there was Socialists Against Anti-Semitism, and I'm not 100% happy with all of their tactics, but they were a really useful resource. Their Facebook page, if anyone said, for example, about Ken Loach, I challenged a friend who was saying Ken Loach is wonderful, and I gave some very clear examples of his anti-Semitism based on things that Socialists Against Anti-Semitism had posted. And this is a Green friend, and he responded with, "Oh, well, I can see that he's a little bit anti-Semitic, but he does make good
A little
films."
bit.
And I just didn't, I mean, and then friends weighed in saying, well, they were friends, they're not anymore, saying,
Yeah.
this was 4 years ago. Friends weighed in saying, "Oh, you're just making yourself a martyr," or "Oh, you're trying to fabricate anti-Semitism so that we pay attention to you." And who are
And
you? And what have you
that's
done
very
with my
similar to the
friend?
weaponization thing,
Yeah,
isn't
and
it?
it felt like they'd been. It was like they'd had an alien induction. These people have completely changed, and they've become rabid. Um, but it was, I mean, it was very interesting because when we got to our party conference in 2024, we had a couple of problematic motions that should not have gone through. You do not preempt the International Court of Justice, basically, amongst other things. But there'd been the race riots, and the kind of the backlash to that was the anti-racism stuff. So there was a panel about anti-racism, and they did have a Jewish speaker. But they also they had a Muslim speaker, and the Muslim speaker is now deputy leader of the Greens. And I knew him as the person who led a witch hunt against a rabbi and posted on October the 7th how wonderful it was.
mm, mm,
So I felt very uncomfortable
mm,
with him being there. And I know that the Jewish members had complained and nothing had happened. So it was a really uncomfortable fringe meet panel. It was a panel debate in the main hall.
mm, mm,
I had my hand up for the entire time, and the chair kept on blocking me. And it was actually Caroline Lucas who said, Elise has had her hand up for 20 minutes. Can you take her next, please? We need to hear from at
mm,
least one Jewish speaker.
mm,
And I talked about how, having been an anti-racism campaigner all my life since I was
mm,
12 and joined Rock Against Racism,
mm,
um, what really horrified me about some of those marches against the race riots was that there was posters, and I read out one that said, we anti-fascist, anti-Zionist, no Zionist welcome at this demo.
mm, mm,
And what I expected to get from my decades in the party was, oh, that doesn't seem right. Lots of kind of shock and silence. What I
mm.
got was loads of people yelling abuse at me
I know, and
and
it's
no
it's
one
the
trying to
progressiveness of
stop.
it, isn't it? They think it's progressive.
Yeah. Um, so that was a clincher for me. That was the moment, the test moment. And then I had the chair came up to me later and berated me in front of other members. She did it to undermine me, but she didn't just do it once, she did it twice.
Mm,
And the second time it was in front of a group of about 40 members queuing for the cloakroom. And she was telling me off for daring to talk about anti-Semitism in a fringe on racism.
mm, mm,
So, and that was when I noticed that things were really beginning to shift.
mm, mm,
And it had become, and that was horrible. That conference didn't feel like the other 65 Green Party conferences I'd been to.
mm. I mean, I think as I say, when I'm talking about the left, I'm not just talking about the Labour left. I'm talking about the wider
Wider left, yeah.
groups. And I know there is differences, but as I say today, just having a look around and nothing about the arson attack. And as I say, seeing finding one of the papers from 7th and the 8th, basically calling it, amazing resistance, and they were just targeting military bases, and I thought, you've not been watching the same stuff, have you?
Mm.
It's like, how can they say that? But they, it's that the trouble. I think what's happening is it's just reinventing anti-Semitism, trying to put a progressive label on it, and so many people on the left seem to be buying into that they think, and what I call the cosplaying with the outfits, you know which used to be called appropriation, but it's now
Now, yeah, and I
progressive.
call it colonialism because they're speaking
Mm,
over actual people. I mean,
mm,
there are a few people I know who are quite prominent in America and the UK who are Palestinian, who
mm,
campaign
mm,
very openly for peace.
mm,
They
mm,
they don't they are not anti-Zionist.
mm, mm,
And the abuse they get from people who are not Palestinian is astonishing.
mm, mm,
But it's that kind of I think there's a kind of a bit of a savior complex going on.
mm,
But it's based on, I mean, we know the knowledge of the Middle East is the history is so
mm,
complicated,
mm,
and they're taking it as a very, very binary view. Um,
mm,
and it's interesting because when I read Dave Rich's book, the real eye opener for me, which kind of led me to understand where a lot of people, some people were coming from on
mm,
wider left, was this binary approach where the world is divided between
mm,
capitalist and anti-capitalist. And if you
mm.
perceive a country not to be Western, then it must be anti-capitalist and therefore good, which is
Or
actually quite,
anti-imperialist is the
yeah,
left, right? Yeah.
yeah. But it's
If they
quite
hate
actually
America,
quite,
they're anti-imperialist.
yeah, and it's actually quite patronizing. And, and,
Mm,
and I remember people saying, "Oh, but Assad is a good man," and I'm thinking, I was in Syria in 2010, and it was very, very Western. There were mobile phone
mm,
shops.
mm,
There were the only difference between the women in Damascus and the women in London were the fact that the skirts were just as tight but longer. That
mm,
was really
mm,
the difference.
mm,
It was so, and yet I'd had people saying how wonderful Assad was. They don't believe what China are doing to the Uyghurs.
mm,
They support Putin, especially because obviously they don't say it out the quiet they don't say that
mm,
out loud that they know that Zelensky must be a Nazi because he's a Jew.
mm, mm,
But they it's like this perpetual. So that was where things, I think, again, things started to shift, was this kind of very binary, lack of nuance,
Mm,
no interest in actual history,
mm,
willing to believe people who've rewritten history. And then on top of that, you get the Holocaust inversion.
mm, mm,
So seeing, I mean, for me, having prominent Greens not allowing me to mourn my family members that were murdered in the Holocaust, including a baby. You know, there's whole lines of my family just vanished, basically, and I'm not allowed to mourn them.
mm,
Oh,
mm,
it's playing the victim card, or oh, get over that.
mm. Well, that's basically what I saw on this person's. Well, they shared the thing about the arson attack, but then everybody in there was going on, it's Mossad. And as I said, the one Jewish person that was speaking up was told, you're playing the victim, get over it. And
I ended up with some cut and paste replies for Twitter because it became so predictable what people were saying
mm,
about the
mm,
ambulances. Oh, they were
mm,
old. It's an insurance job. Mossad, false flag.
mm,
You can just so I do cut and paste replies a lot
mm,
because
mm,
what people say is so predictable now.
mm. Do you, because what I find with a lot of people who I thought I could have some sort of debate with, and they just reply starting going on about Trump or they will go off at a tangent and won't address the issues. They just say, well, you must be supporting Trump and all this sort of thing. What is the debate like with the people in the Green Party? Can you actually debate the issue, or do they just go straight into, you're either there or you're either there?
I still think there's a majority of ordinary members who will just discuss and debate, but
Mm,
most of them are busy getting on with local stuff.
mm, mm,
So it's at a national level, the people who are more active at a national level, and it's the newer members that are really making a difference. There were a few that were
mm,
always there. So there was when it was first announced about the concerns of Jeremy Corbyn and anti-Semitism in the Labour
mm,
Party. Um, a member in his, I guess he was mid-70s at the time. He sadly passed away last year, and he posted on Facebook, "Well, I've never experienced anti-Semitism." So I replied, pointing out that one, he wasn't Jewish, and two, he lives in a small town in the northwest where there aren't even any Jews listed in the census. So how would
mm,
he
mm,
know?
mm,
And that was interesting because so there were some of the members like that, older members who come from very rural areas or little towns where there are no
mm.
Jews. So they just they don't seem to understand that they're not going to experience anti-Semitism because they're not going to be a target. So there
So,
are a few ones like that.
mm, mm.
So it is the newer members that I'm finding are more problematic.
I'd be quite curious which ones you've got. I probably know some of them from,
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Well, I
yeah.
recognize some of the names
Mm,
from their Twitter accounts,
mm.
and they're not nice.
Um, Before we open it up to questions from everybody else, can you just talk a bit about how you find how you see the debate going at the conference around this motion? And
I mean, it's going to be different because it's an
mm,
online conference.
all right.
In-person conference are easier because you can engage more with people
Mm,
outside
mm,
the voting sessions.
yeah.
I have no idea how it's going to go. I mean, the motion that's really problematic is the Zionism is racism motion,
Mm,
and it breaches our code of conduct, it breaches our constitution, it breaches the policy process,
mm,
it breaches our philosophical basis and our core values, it breaches our actual policy, and it
mm,
also breaches the Equality Act on top of all of that.
mm,
So it shouldn't even be on the conference floor. I know that the proposers are trying to bump it up because it only reached 12 in the E motion, so we've got to get through the
mm,
other motions first. So E12 means it's extremely unlikely to be heard. So they're
mm,
trying to amend the standing orders report at the beginning of the conference. If they amend the standing orders report, the motion will be motion number 3 and it will be heard.
mm,
And that's the tactic. And they've been actively recruiting new members to join just to vote for it. And we're seeing online and in party groups, people saying, "I've joined to vote this motion through. If it gets through, I'm leaving." And
mm.
so there is this big organization of people who've joined just for this motion, and that is actually quite frightening.
And what do you think will happen if it passes? What do you see the outcome being there?
Well, I think it's gonna send the party into a bit of a headspin because
Mm,
it contradicts existing policy, but
mm,
it doesn't amend existing policy. So we're going to have
mm,
contradictory policy. It contradicts the philosophical basis. but they haven't tried to amend the philosophical basis, which they can't do at the conference anyway, because it has to go to an all-member vote and it has to get a two-thirds majority. So we're going to have this document that says the party believes this, the party believes this, and it completely contradicts everything about that we're about.
I'm
So
just, yeah.
I don't know what will happen, but I hope it will be, if it does get through. I mean, even if it doesn't get through, I hope it's a wake-up call, because some of us have been trying to warn the party for 2 years now about this shift.
I think the trouble is I keep thinking, when's the wake-up call on the left, and I've not seen it. And yeah.
No,
I mean, locally where I am, the Greens have got a bit of a coalition with some independent socialists, and they're part of an overarching group saying vote Gaza, vote for Palestine.
Yeah.
And this is for local elections in a
I
couple of
know.
weeks' time.
We're here, we're not doing that. We haven't done that.
You know,
our local party hasn't. It's been very clear.
You know, it's been very
All local
focused. They were
issues.
part of a tent encampment outside the town hall, and it's very much the leaflets are going out. There's an overarching group with some other left groups behind it, but they come to a coalition and they're campaigning, and you know, it's actually quite divisive and where I am to be doing that. It's devices anyway, but it's particularly, I'm just relieved they haven't started knocking on doors like in Bristol and other places, but I think that's only a matter of time.
Yeah. I mean, that does frighten me, the door knocking.
Shall I open it up? I know there's some questions in the chat. Is Joe or Martine? Somebody can look at the chat ones and perhaps let me have a look. Have we got many questions? The people in the chat, do you want to put your hands up and ask, or if I go to the first one, somebody called.
Can I just comment on? I've just looked.
Yeah.
Someone said Bernie Sanders is Jewish, but only on his parents' side, which I think is brilliant. His brother was a Green councillor in my area. He's an old friend.
Oh, so I've got somebody called Richard Cafton. I can't see him here. Do you want me to read it out, or if you're here, put your hand up. Oh, Richard, yes. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, hi. First of all, very interesting debate. So thank you very much. Very illuminating. I have a question about Zach Polanski. And with regards to the fact that he's Jewish, how, as well as being the leader of the party, how can he tolerate the terrible, appalling views of Motin Ali, who, in my opinion, is an anti-Semite?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of people are blind to what he's about. I have a few friends in the party who found out and left because of it. They don't know the history. They really don't know the history. But now if you try and talk about the history, they don't want to listen. So because he's been built up as this hero of his community. I find it very uncomfortable, to be frank. I find it very uncomfortable. I would give him the benefit of the doubt if he'd apologised for what he said on October the 7th and October the 8th. I would give him some leeway if he went some way to apologising for what he did to the Leeds University rabbi.
Yeah.
But he hasn't. He really hasn't. So, I mean, if I'm in the same room as him, I walk out now because that's all I can do. It's too much. It takes too much energy to try and challenge him now that he's reached this point.
Is he attracting new members to the party who've got the same or similar views as him?
I don't know if he is. He may well be, but it will be I presume, in areas that I mean, Oxford is a very mixed, very diverse, very friendly, thankfully, community. So I don't see that kind of thing here. So I'm not. I don't know. I don't know whether it's through him or it's through Zach being very populist, which is a great recruitment tool, but populism never really succeeds because it trips up at some point.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I do find it very uncomfortable.
All right, thanks, Richard, for that question. There's a few comments in the chat which are more or less on the same sort of topic, but if I don't summarize that, please put your hand up and ask separately. But basically about your views about Zach Polanski, that he's quite happy with his deputy. What's your thoughts about Zach Polanski as a Jewish leader is more or less what's been asked, and
it's not something I talk about much because he was a very good friend of mine, and I don't really speak to him anymore. And I just feel very uncomfortable because he's done an amazing job. His party membership is up phenomenally, but I worry about the populism. I worry that he'll crash and burn. I, to some extent, worry for him that he'll crash and burn. But I also worry about some of the people that he's associating with, who
Mm,
he must know who they are, because we used to talk
mm,
about it in the early days of Jewish Greens. So
mm,
it's yeah, it's something that makes me feel really unhappy.
mm. Okay, I shall go this Dr. Oh, I've lost the name. Ephraim?
Yes,
Yes.
I
Do you want to
just
ask your
wanted to
question?
say that even though I think that at present people in the party don't understand the history of the ideology, green ideology, Salman Sharma has pointed out that the roots were both in the left and in the far right. And the Jews were pollution. The Nazis had adopted some green policies, but people don't remember that. Perhaps it is not relevant. But what is relevant is that in the late 19th century there was Cesare Algernati from Ancona. He converted to Catholicism and then went to synods of bishops and claimed that the Jews were carrying out the ritual murders, even though he knew perfectly well that it was false. And I have seen his papers, for example, before the First World War, which claimed, he shows a picture from the Haggadah of Pesach, and would say that, you see, there is the Pharaoh bathing in the blood of the babies, and he was claiming that it is the Jews who are bathing in the blood of the babies. So that what he did, he founded the journal L'Avvenire, which is still the newspaper of the bishops. And he founded a weekly which had a crucial role in being between La Civiltà Cattolica of the Jesuits, which was very intellectual, and the regional clerical press copied or elaborated on themes that he proposed. For that reason, the fascists, after he died, they wanted to make a series of medals, golden medals for the anti-Semites, and they wanted a medal for him also, even though he was born Jewish. This is accepted because it is convenient. If there wasn't acceptance on the other side, they wouldn't have accepted Polanski and they wouldn't have accepted Algernati.
I'm trying to think how to respond to this, because it's a bit of history I don't know anything about, but I think there is a fundamental here, which is that a lot of people aren't interested in our history at all.
Yes.
And that's a problem, and that has been allowed to distort into, basically our existence is being denied effectively.
For me, especially, as I am from Baghdadi background,
yeah, I did wonder.
Well, I think that I grew up in Israel in the 60s, at a time where the schools were very anti-colonial, very anti-imperialist in Israel. They weren't teaching to hate anybody, but they were trying to make us understand what was the role of Britain. They never tried to demonize her, but just the fact that there are things that are not even told here. For example, my mother survived a massacre, and it wasn't German troops, it was Nazi-inspired, but it was Sir Kinahan Cornwallis convinced General Archibald Wavell to let the massacre run its course, to show the locals, look, Britain is not a friend of the Jews. Radio Berlin is not correct on that point. perhaps people would be joyful to learn about that here, the anti-Semites. But there is that problem. We are confusing the aspirational level, where it is told that anti-Semitism has been defeated, and things like in Italy it is different, because there was just recycling the fascists into Democrats.
I think we need to get some more questions, but thank
Yes,
you for that.
yes.
I've got somebody, AK. I don't know what you've got your hand up.
Yeah, that's me. Thank you. Elise, thank you for your sharing your experience. It sounds really quite traumatic. I've on social media, I can see that you're getting a lot of hate as well in some of the groups, but I'm really interested in more of a deep dive into the mechanics of this vote at the weekend. If it does say it gets bumped up and there is a vote, how many people need to vote for it? What's your best guess of what's likely to happen? I can see that Palestine, Greens for Palestine's got hundreds of members in it. Is that going to be enough to carry it, or is the broader membership going to vote against it?
So we have an unknown because of the anti-racism march. A lot of people will be on that march. My understanding is that they will be trying to dial in. I've been on large marches, and so many people are using the internet that it crashes, so they may struggle. So I don't know what the numbers will be like. I do know that the pre-conference workshop yesterday had a large number of people. The pre-conference workshops usually have around about 40 people, and there were over 120, which is quite worrying. The motion will need a simple majority, but and well, in theory, although actually because it breaches the because it changes our philosophical basis, it shouldn't even be going to conference. It should be going to a member-wide vote with the 2/3 majority. So there is that is going to be flagged up by a couple of members. But the fundamentally the vote, if the vote is very close, there is what's called a card vote. And a card vote is where people can bring proxies. And the danger there is that the people who are very organised will have far more proxies. I don't think it will come to a card vote because it's difficult to do that in an online conference. The in-person conference, it's more common. So I actually don't really know what's going to happen. I will have a better idea of whether it's even going to be debated after the Standing Orders Committee report, which is at the beginning of conference. And the Standing Orders Committee are the elected body that oversee the running of conference, that oversee whether or not motions fulfil the rules, which flags up a massive question because they shouldn't have allowed this motion through. It does not meet any of the rules. And there's plenty of reasons why they should have refused it. But unfortunately, several of the members of the committee were very open about supporting the motion, which they're meant to be objective. So we are where we are. But the Standing Orders Committee report can be amended, and that there is the campaigners for the motion have been very open about the fact that they've submitted an amendment to try and bump the motion up so that it's the third amendment to be heard in that category.
Well, I mean, thank you, Elise, for that. I mean, I think the trouble with that as well is it's all those sort of procedural things to try and get it through, isn't it? But it's the attitudes
and
that
they'll try
people have.
everything.
Yeah,
they'll try extending conference by an extra 15 minutes to get it through because they've done that before.
Yeah, I'm just going to open it up for some more questions. Matthew Callow's raised his hand, and just generally, if people want to ask wider questions about the left, I'm quite happy to answer anything. And Elise, this is, though we're looking at the Greens, we're also looking at how anti-Semitism has taken root in what should be more progressive areas. So, Matthew,
yeah, my question is, I've not heard a great deal about your party recently. I'm not entirely sure why. I just wondered if they'd all jumped ship and joined the Green Party. But just a bit of context where I am. I'm a Quaker, part of Quakers in Britain. They ditched theology 100 years ago and replaced it with socialist theory. They have a huge commitment to the environment. A lot of Quakers are members of the Green Party, and the Green Party in its current form, it's heaven on earth for many of my co-religionists, unfortunately, and a lot of them who were very, very excited by Jeremy Corbyn and rejoined the Labour Party when he was the Labour leader. They're now actually joining the Greens, and there's so much sort of excitement about what's going on at the moment. So yeah, my question is there a move from your party to the Green Party that you're aware of?
Yeah, and in fact, the National Party is aware of a Facebook group for people who are joint members of the Green Party and your party, which goes against our party rules. Most political parties have a rule that you can't have dual membership. But yeah, there has definitely been, and some have crossed over specifically for this Zionism motion. I mean, there's that bit of me that's enjoying the kind of Monty Python-esque stuff that's going on around your party because it's so predictable. But there's also a bit of me that would like them to be better organised so that some of these people can just leave and we can get our party back.
I mean, I think the thing about your party is parties to the left of Labour, there's been various incarnations like Respect, Socialist Alliance. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but you know, there are these parties, but they will attract people who are anti-Semitic, but they often just fall apart. And I think we're seeing some of that with your party in terms of the two slates. And I think, as I referenced when I was talking, the fact that somebody on Jeremy Corbyn's slate actually was doing conspiracy theory stuff about 710 that was referencing some television program as a promotion of Jewish people. Another one is that she thought that Charlie Kirk was probably Jewish because he said something, and that actually, because he then became critical of Israel, that's why Mossad basically killed him. And you just, you know, and this is the person they've elected onto there. So I think there's no problem for them joining that. From what I've seen is I think a lot of people joined the Greens because your party didn't set up quickly. So they went into the Greens. Some have then moved back into your party. Where I am, your party doesn't seem to have much strength because there's been an independent socialist group that's set up. But also there will be people like the SWP getting involved who, when I talk about things like Respect and Socialist Alliance, they do have a bit of a reputation for destroying parties, but they don't always grow a party very well. They will go in and try and pick members and it just all falls apart. It's quite interesting that your party managed to have all these disagreements without the SWP's help, really.
Before they even had a name.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's quite impressive they could do that without the SWP.
I mean, so something that really worries me, I'm on the political right, the centre right. I'm a member of the Conservative Party, but I actually want more Zionists to be on the political left, because it's like everyone I know who's a Zionist, they're on the political right. And I thought, I don't want Zionism to be completely associated with the political right. I want Zionism to be a pan-political spectrum thing. I see it as very much like, I see Zionism as a liberation movement. I don't see it as colonization like a lot of people on the left seem to. But I just would like the whole political spectrum to be represented.
You can't be a colonizer without a home country. There is no country that Jews in Israel are colonizing from.
Absolutely. And when I went to Israel several years ago, it was the most ethnically diverse country I've ever seen. All shades of people. I couldn't believe it. And I tell people that they don't believe me.
Yeah, so. I've just had an exchange with an old friend in the Greens who refuses to believe that the CEO of the largest bank in Israel is an Arab.
Yeah.
That there are Arab justices who've put Jews in prison. I mean, they just won't. They don't want to believe it.
But there was an Arab justice that put a former prime minister in prison.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. 2, I think.
Have we got? Sorry, thank you, Matthew. That's really quite interesting.
And can I just say there are a lot of Jews on the left, Zionist Jews on the left. It's just I think they're scared. I mean, I call myself in left-wing circles, I refer to myself as an indigenous Judean now.
Thank you.
Is there any more questions? I can't see anybody's hands up. Yaron, did you put your hand up? I saw you put your hand up, but not
I
the yellow
did.
hand.
I also put a question in the chat, but I just wanted to ask you, first of all, thank you very much. That was really, really interesting, fascinating. I don't know, the adjectives don't kind of run smoothly on this kind of sad and annoying topic, but I learned a lot. Thank you. I just wanted to ask you about the election in Denton and Gorton. So, well, yes, that's what I was expecting. So what's the verbal part of the eye rolling? I mean, obviously, as a Green member, you would have been satisfied that your party won a by-election, but the campaign was rather alarming, wasn't it? I happen to know that constituency very well, and it was quite shocking. I found just the way that voters were approached. But what do you make of it?
Thankfully, I was away for most of it, so I could just say, not doing that. But also, I haven't been able to be as active on national stuff because I've been dealing with a lot of the anti-Semitism stuff. For me, it's kind of at the moment any victory in the party, so massive growth in membership, lots of councillor wins, winning a parliamentary by-election. I'm just not able to celebrate because it feels hollow. Yeah, and I said to someone today, actually, it feels a bit like an amputation in a way. So I can't. It's very upsetting. I find it very hard to articulate how I feel, but it's a very hollow win for me. And it's sad because I know the person who won. I don't know her very well, but I know of her, and she was very, very good when she joined the party. But I was made aware through my anti-Semitism campaigning networks of a very problematic post that she made on Holocaust Memorial Day last year, where I think she retweeted she shared a post from Rachel Reeves, who was lighting a candle for Holocaust Memorial Day, and what she didn't just say her own thing about, remembering, we must never forget or anything like that. She just said, we have to stop selling arms to Israel. And I find anyone who takes away my mourning my own family who were murdered in the Holocaust, can't we just have one day, please? And it just left me cold. So even if I had wanted to volunteer on that basis, I wouldn't have done. But yeah, when it's interesting, it was the way it operated. I mean, I live in a community, I represented a community where 20% of the population were Muslim. I got a mosque built, something I'm very proud of. I get called sister by Muslim community leaders. So I know how to campaign with a predominantly Muslim community. And this was different. This didn't feel, I don't know how, it didn't feel quite honest in a way.
I think this is similar to what I'm seeing where I am in terms of the electoral arrangement between the Greens and some independent socialists, and this overarching group about vote for Palestine, and this May, and it's a local election, so there's really very little, a council who don't do international stuff, but they're targeting the pensions committee impact investment. But it feels that is the whole focus, and it's a bit like what you were saying about the MP by-election. I don't know what other councils are like, what those campaigns are like, but it is even the colours of the leaflets are the sort of Palestinian flags type thing. Every picture there's badges and everything on them, and I just think it's become such a focus where I am as the issue, and as I say, it's divisive anywhere, but particularly where I am. Anybody else got any questions or anything you wanted to sort of add to what we're talking about? As I say, it's a wide sort of thing we're looking at from the Greens, and
well, I could just say one other thing, which is that my father was in C&D. I grew up in a left-wing household, although he gave up on the Labour Party in 1963. But I also grew up learning about international affairs and doing my research. So I became aware of some of what was going on in Israel and with Palestinians, but I wasn't. It was never. That was the one thing that was never really discussed at home. So I've learned a lot in the last 10 years, really, about our heritage, about my identity. My DNA test helped. And that got me more interested. So I'm involved. I'm very fortunate, I think, to be involved in Oxford with a group of people, including Jewish and Muslim Israelis, campaigning for peace. And we're working primarily through Standing Together. So I'm on a national committee for Standing Together, but also through We Democracy, who are campaigning for to against what they call a theocracy, but they're on the left. They do not support Netanyahu. Put all that together, and I still cannot get people to accept me. I was asked to speak at a Palestine rally 4.5 years ago to talk about how anti-Semitism doesn't help Palestinians. The young Muslim students who organised it were specific that that's what they wanted me to talk about. And I thought that was brilliant. That wouldn't happen now. None of that means I pass now. I intentionally had a photograph of me taken holding an anti-Netanyahu poster, and I'm still not accepted. None of it is good enough.
I think because underneath it, it's not about Palestine, it's anti-Semitic. I mean, when Hamas were executing their own people, there
Still
was
are.
silence from but there was silence from those people that had been on the marches. And I said, well, hang on a minute. Are they the wrong sort of Palestinians? You're telling me you're not pro-Hamas, you're pro-Palestinian, but and it's the same with the Iranian, the protesters. There's been where was the protest called by the groups to go and march for that?
We had our deputy leader, the woman who's proposing this zionism and racism motion, and one of our elected elections coordinators went to the CND Stop the War rally, but actually it was supported by organisations that don't like Jews.
But it also had all those Iranian,
and it had all the
that's what I'm
Iranian
thinking
flag.
about, the Iranian Ayatollah posters and everything.
Yeah, and I think, and it's interesting because I think, I mean, the lead proposer for this zionism and racism motion, she spoke on the platform at the Al Quds rally about the motion. But the Al Quds rally has always been pro IRGC. Where's the outpouring of horror at what's happening to young Iranians? They're still being hung now.
Well, there was a young woman, I think, just recently, an 18-year-old woman who was just been executed in Iran. And this is the whole thing about 7/10, wasn't it? That nothing was, there was no outcry about what was happening to the women being raped and murdered, and those pictures, and then people saying, where's the evidence? And I think it's staring you right in the face there, I mean, Hamas even filmed stuff. What more do you need? And feminist groups that, I count myself a feminist as well as left-wing, the silence and then the denial, and all trying to put context, and it feels like their principles go when it's Jewish people. The anti-Semitism is there, and what I find really awful is that it's wrapped in a progressive flag, and then when there seems to be no proper political analysis in some ways. It's when Palestine's free, we're all free. What the hell are you talking about?
They have no idea. That's the thing, they have no
and
idea.
even things like the environment and do they think they're sort of Hamas is some sort of socialist freedom fighters?
Well, some do, and I think
I know.
that's incredible that it's that lack of awareness, but it's this binary view again.
And I mean, don't get me onto queers for Palestine, the nonsense there.
And when anyone actually speaks out, I mean, I noticed in the chat that someone said about Peter Tatchell being arrested for he has always had a placard criticising Hamas. I've had a little, I happen to know Peter very well, and I had a little discussion with him on WhatsApp about his interpretation of Intifada and I was really surprised because it was like an alien abduction moment for Peter. Where he said, well, Intifada just means uprising. And I said, yes, but when Intifada is used against Israel, it means suicide bombings and stabbings and indiscriminate murder. So I've given him some information, and I think he's on board now. But yeah, people to turn up at demonstrations with placards against Hamas, and they're the ones that get arrested. So the police aren't doing enough, the government aren't doing enough. They're leaving it to us to try and fight all this.
I can see David waving his hand.
Yeah,
So if you press
so
the
can
little
I.
button so a yellow hand comes up, David. Do you want to speak?
We need a football
Yeah,
hand for David, I think.
Oh,
I can't. I think my hand doesn't work. Anyway, I just want to ask a very simple question, really. And I'm a bit afraid to ask it because I think I can see the answer in your face. I mean, what does it feel like to feel that your political home is not a place that accepts Jewish members? And people might think that that's a bit of a sort of over the top question, but I don't think it is. Or let me ask a second question then, which is, under what conditions do you think you could be acceptable as a Jewish person in the Green Party? So you said that speaking out against Netanyahu is not enough. What would be enough?
I think what would be enough is if the National Party took things more seriously. Just
No, no, no.
saying, doing little
Sorry.
bits.
What could
What would be
you
enough for me
do?
first?
What could you do that would make you acceptable as a Jewish person in the Green Party?
Well, I am accepted in some circles. The problem is that there's this circle of loud people, a lot of whom are newer members, who won't accept me, and that's the issue. Knowing that there are these other members is what keeps me going. Knowing that I'm getting messages from people, all ages, shapes, and sizes, private messages saying, "Hang on in there, how are you doing?" Knowing that in the newly formed Greens Against Anti-Semitism, we've got non-Jewish members. So that, and they're the people who've been around for a long time. And that's what keeps me going, is that hope that we can rescue the party and get it back to what it was. Especially knowing that the process to change the philosophical basis, the process to change policy isn't simple because it's member-led and it takes several conferences. So that all of that gives me hope.
I mean, I could ask the same question of you, Yvonne. You're not Jewish, right? But what does it feel like to discover that you're not acceptable to be a Labour councillor because of certain views that you expressed about Israel or about anti-Semitism?
Well, as I say, I joined the party when I was 16. I left when I was 61. I haven't always been totally active all that time, but and I haven't always agreed with things. I suppose in politics, people aren't always your friends. You think they are, but they're not. But it's taken me a while to sort of process that people who were my ward colleague councillors would walk past me in the street, and that they believed the lies about me. But I think, David, what you said to me when we went for coffee, you need to do something constructive instead of ranting on Facebook, and so being here it helps doing something productive. I don't
want to get too therapeutic, but you two sound as bad as me in that both of you were quite unable to say how it feels.
Oh, it feels.
It's hard to articulate. I mean, it's not just for me. It's not just the Greens. It's a wider network. I have incredibly strong network of environmental and peace campaigners going back decades. I had planned to have a big 60th birthday party last year. I didn't have it because I didn't know who to invite anymore, because I don't know who of them are my friends anymore, which is horrible. My life is hollowed out. I'm telling myself it's an opportunity to do other things, and I have made lots of nice new friends, mostly Jewish or good allies. And I think I'm going to count Yvonne in that now.
Yeah, definitely. When you're in London, we've got to go for a coffee.
We will. But it's really tough after decades of working with all these people to find that they are willing to believe an anonymous meme on Facebook over me.
Well, it's very similar to, some of these councillors were people I had been really helpful to because, yeah, I mean, yes, it was upsetting. I think what was upsetting was not so much, well, the people who lied, but it was the people that were silent and wanted me just to sort of make it go away and not stand up for myself. And, but it's about finding a new purpose for me, I suppose. And I still can see there's a few more people to go. I've seen that recently on social media, people who I thought better off, and I've seen some things they've said, and I thought, oh fuck, sorry, I probably shouldn't swear on the seminar, but
No, no, I think
yeah,
sometimes we need to
I
swear.
can see there's still a more few. So I probably lost about 90% of people, but I've actually got really good friendships now with people who I did know, but because like I've got a friend who does some documentaries around anti-Semitism and has made a big, wanted to really do something. She's not Jewish, but she wanted to be able to do something to speak up. So it's upsetting, but I couldn't be part of that now, looking at what they're saying. But what I do get angry at is you don't tell me I'm right wing and all those sort of things, because I'm not. You can be left wing and not anti-Semitic. And I mean, they basically tried to take me down, and yeah, they did as being a councillor, but they haven't shut me up. In fact, it just makes me more determined to, speak up. And that is my thing as well. I just think that if you're not Jewish, you need to be an ally and you need to speak up, and
Thank you. Can I respond to a couple of comments in the chat? I noticed someone talked about how can I'm just going to scroll back up because it's just gone just as I was about to read it out. The Green Party elected a Jewish leader. How can you seriously believe that Jewish people are unwelcome in the Green Party? They're anti-Semites. So there's two responses to that. One, a lot of the people that make me feel unwelcome as a Jew and make other Jews feel unwelcome joined the party after he was elected as a leader. And two, there were a chunk of people who voted for him because they believed that he's anti-Zionist. I don't know that he is. I think he treads a line. I mean, he grew up in a very Zionist household. He has family in Israel, but that's why. And there was also another comment added in about the Canadian Greens. So I used to be the international officer for the Green Party. I've got decades of contacts of Greens around the world. And I watched things shift in the Canadian Greens, and it was horrible the way, yes, they had a black woman of Caribbean heritage who converted to Judaism. She was treated appallingly, and I couldn't believe it. But while that was happening, a friend of mine from the Canadian Greens blocked me because he'd said something really problematic about Jews, and I responded, and he just did not want to listen. And it's not just Canadian Greens, the Australian Greens. I mean, people I used to know and respect have gone down a massive rabbit hole now. So it's unfortunate it's happening around in other, and I know it's not just in the Greens, it's in the left, the wider left. It's happening. It's not just here. It's happening in other Western countries. So you could say we're not alone.
But it's that inability to have debates with people, because when I put this stuff up about the person in your party and said, look, this is shocking, I was told, oh, you've shared the Telegraph, Trump, blah, 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 blah. You should be ashamed. It's propaganda. And I think, and then when I asked, well, is it not true? Nothing. You can't have rational debates. And it's very difficult because you're put in a box,
There's this comedian that keeps on coming up on my Instagram, and I must find out who she is. And it's something she was doing a comedy show about 8 years ago, and there's a snippet from it, and she just says, "Do you remember those days in the left when we used to do critical thinking?"
Yeah, I'm not too sure about that.
But it's true.
Yeah.
So many people I know just that it's not just they're not listening. They don't want to do the research themselves anymore. They would have done on other issues.
I mean, unfortunately, it's not that new. I mean, I used to have a blog over 10 years ago, and I criticised Galloway in Respect. I'm not going to say too much, but basically I just got piled on by other people saying, you can't say this. And these are the people then a bit later then started to say, oh, he's awful, isn't he? I thought, And interestingly, when I first went onto Twitter, he blocked me straight away. And I thought, how the hell do you know my name? Because it was an anonymous blog. But, there's always been there's always been
a bit of it.
Yeah, but also it's about defending things, and you just can't see the bad stuff. You've just got to defend it, and you can't have a nuanced view, and you can't, your inability to really stand up and criticize Hamas, because then you're not supporting the Palestinian people. Is that, yeah.
it's that binary thing of not being. So it's like with Iran, I can say that I don't think that what US and Israel are doing is necessarily the right tactic. But I also support the Iranian people. That's not going to mean that I defend the IRGC. And
No.
that's that kind of thing that I don't understand why people can't see that. Why you have to you can only be on one side. Why can't you say, feel for the Palestinian and Jewish and Israeli victims? No one's mentioning, the 27-year-old woman who died after Iranian bombing in Israel this week. No one's mentioning her. She's not in the news. They don't care. And as you said before, they don't care about the tens of thousands of Iranians, children being tortured.
Myself and Elise could probably just keep talking. So has anybody got any questions?
Yes,
you
please,
just go away, we'll just keep talking.
Questions, opinions?
Correct, yeah. Because I know there's quite a few, I recognise a few names here and people who I know have got opinions, so.
Well, I see the comment about Noam Chomsky. I mean, I just think, I feel like he's a traitor, but also he's not an expert, he's a linguist, and people treat him as an expert.
I think people listen to who reinforces their views, and
absolutely.
Social media's made that worse because you can really go into an echo chamber because everything then comes through the algorithm.
Yeah. Oh, well, this Jew says, okay, but I can give you 20 that say the opposite. I mean, it's so tiring.
But it was also, that was the situation I had where I was a councillor and where I was that as well as the people I mentioned around Jeremy Corbyn, there was where I was a councillor and the ward I stood had 2 or 3 very high profile Jewish activists, but Jeremy Corbyn supporters, anti-Israel supporters, and it was very hard for me to try and challenge those things because of how it was where I was, the place I was in, and in terms of the demographics. Richard, I can see your hand is up.
Yes,
Hello, Richard.
Hi, Elise. Thank you very much. I've learned a lot by listening to this, but I don't think you'll be surprised to hear that I disagree with certain emphases quite strongly. I mean, as a member of the Labour Party who was disciplined for anti-Semitism with something like 60 other Jewish members of the Labour Party, we're very aware that anti-Semitism and the abuse of anti-Semitism allegations are very difficult to separate out. Now, I hope, as committed as you are to rooting out anti-Semitism, I don't think you can actually root it out like all forms of racism. It has to be contained, it has to be curtailed, but one also has to look at the circumstances which allow it to fester. And what has struck me is how little has come up this evening about the notion of Israel as the Jewish state speaking for all Jews. And therefore, the elision that we are not supposed to make and that we oppose others making of Jews, all Jews with Zionism, is made constantly by the uncritical support of communal bodies for Israel and by the Israeli government. We are witnessing what I believe to be a genocide. Most genocide scholars claim it to be a genocide. You have to act to prevent genocide. That's what the Genocide Convention says.
Richard.
You don't, just a sec, you don't wait until the ICJ in 10 years' time has said it was actually a genocide. If you'd done that, you'd have been waiting to 1946 before you condemned what was happening to the Jews in Nazi Germany.
Richard,
Sure.
The point of the seminar was to look at our experiences in the left and the anti-Semitism.
I've appreciated that very much.
Yeah, and I know you're talking about accusations around anti-Semitism, but I have seen, I'm not going to name names, you probably know some of the people and some of the ones who were in my ward, but, there were statements clearly that were anti-Semitic and people were still defending them. And another thing is, so there's somebody, I say I really don't want to get into naming names, but there's somebody who does like an online program and was very close Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, I know about quite a lot of the people. I was around them. I know what they were like. So for my, I was part of, I was close to a lot of those people. I knew them, and I had a huge amount of doubts when I saw who was around him as well. But that this person did a lot of fundraising and everything, and since then they've not been in the Labour Party or anything. They did a calendar of heroes, right, and selling the calendar. And in one of those, apologies, I can't remember the name. Is it Dr. Alawadden, who's come out with things that are clearly anti-Semitic? There is no doubt about that.
He wears a T-shirt that says "anti-Semitic and proud."
But this calendar for this, I saw it at the end of the year. It was a calendar he was selling, and it had his heroes. And I looked at that and I thought, how can you, you are basically you've seen somebody as a hero who is clearly anti-Semitic. There's no, and what was happening, I found in Labour, is it went away from people where, could it be a grey area? I don't know. It wasn't for me to judge, but people were defending it, to what was being defended was way over the line. There was no doubt about it. And this person was very close to Jeremy Corbyn, who does this sort of podcast thing, and he's become, the people he now has on his show are people like Chris Williamson, and and that doctor, and
and
and that
I agree
calendar,
with you. I agree with you. I agree there are really, well, problematic is an understatement, some of the people who appear on the Crispin Flintoft show to
I didn't want to name names.
No, I mean, it's absolutely true. And
so as someone who's never been in the Labour Party, my feeling was that it didn't feel like the Labour Party handled it well, and enabled people to understand that the separation between where it, and I know there were people who weaponized it on both sides, but also the people who were actually genuinely anti-Semitic, and that actually sadly allowed the people who were generally anti-Semitic, a lot of them, to get away with it.
I mean, initially, I think the thought was like, Jeremy Corbyn's badly advised. As I say, when I saw some of the people he appointed, I was like, oh God, that's not going to go well. But the people he had round him, so there was two very old friends of his who are Jewish socialist group, who were really defending him. And then where I was councillor, 3 or 4 who were quite high profile supporting him. And I think, that made it harder for myself and others to say that this is anti-Semitic, because they say they're just trying to take him down, they're the right wing. And, it all got muddled. But the more I was seeing it, I thought, you just hang on a minute. Now you're going further and further along. At what point will you not defend this? Because it was, and as I say, Crispin, as we now named him, having that person, the people he has on his show.
Well, he's just interviewed the woman who's leading the Zionism is Racism motion.
Oh, I mean,
she actually said in the interview that that Zionist members will be hunted down. So, Richard, I wanted to respond to one bit, which was, I mean, first of all, I think I've never heard Israel speak on my behalf particularly, but actually, I suppose. But the other side of this is what you were saying about the organisations. There's this classic response, which I've seen so many times over the last decade of, oh, well, they're all Zionist organisations, aren't they? I mean, CST just deals with security and monitoring anti-Semitism. That's all they do. So I think anything labelled against them is wrong. And in fact, Dave Rich from CST ran anti-Semitism, the first ever anti-Semitism training at a political party conference in 2018, and it was at a Green conference, and there were over 100 people in the room, and he did talk about how to understand anti-Semitism, how to talk about anti-Semitism, how to not be anti-Semitic when supporting Palestinian rights. So that was what someone senior in CST. It's the same with Anti-Semitism Policy Trust. The Board of Deputies, it didn't get any traction, but I happened to have a link with Ahmed Fawad Al-Khatib, who is a Gazan who fled Hamas when he was, I think, 16 and now lives in America. And he's part of an organisation working for peace, for proper peace. He had lost 34 members of his family in Gaza the last 2.5 years, but he has a lot of Jewish friends. And now I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, and he no, so he spoke. He was in the UK in January. He spoke. I had the fortune to meet him. He spoke at JW3, which is a big Jewish centre in northwest London, to a packed out audience. And Phil Rosenberg, who is head of Board of Deputies, stood up at the end, thanked him, and actually talked about, what was wrong with the Netanyahu government. So there are more, increasingly people speaking out, but it was right at the beginning. December 2023, we always go to the menorah lighting in Oxford because it's named after a very close friend of ours who passed away in his 30s. And the rabbi, who is very, very pro-Israel, talked about Palestinians, supporting Palestinians and peace at the menorah lighting. And that was 2 months after October the 7th. It is being said, it's not being reported that it's being said.
Well, what is reported is the appearance of a relatively monolithic Jewish community that is gung-ho behind Israel.
But who's doing that reporting?
That's what comes across. And that's,
yes, because
and
the people who are doing the reporting don't like Jews.
Yeah, but
I'm sorry, Richard, that's where it's coming from. I see where it's coming from, and it's being peddled by people who want the world to believe that we all love Netanyahu and agree with everything he's doing. That's the problem.
You just look at the Board of Deputies when 36 members wrote a letter to the Financial Times last year saying
I know,
that
and look what
Netanyahu,
shifted.
and look what happened. They came down on them like a ton of bricks and disciplined them
and that was wrong.
For daring to voice criticism of Netanyahu.
But it's led to a change. That's the thing. It's actually led to a change, and it's a positive change.
I hope so, but it isn't a change which is reflected in popular consciousness. That is the problem.
And that's the problem.
And
because we've never, as Jews, we've always just been kept quiet and never promoted the good stuff. And we need to be better at reporting this stuff.
And well, is there any? I'm just aware that we can get very caught up. No, it's absolutely fine, Richard. It's really interesting.
No, I'm going. I won't say any more at this point. But there clearly are a whole range of issues that I would like to tease out and have nuanced discussion about. And I do so from a position of hating anti-Semitism, hating what Zionism has become, which seems to me a genocidal, ethnocentric philosophy.
But we do need to move on a bit, Richard.
And this is the context. This is the context in which these debates are taking place outside, and you can't.
Maybe I'll just try to say something without being called upon, if I may. I mean, it's just a bit tiresome to listen to the slogans. But in the short time that we have, I just want to.
I mean, you need to put your hand up because Richard was coming to an end, and then we can have.
I was putting my hand up for a long time, and
okay, but I was waiting for Richard to come to an end.
I've ended. Thank you very much.
What do you want to say, Yvonne?
I just wanted to ask Elise if you could tell us a little bit about is there a counter campaign? Has there been in the past few weeks within the Green Party against this motion, and what?
There are different groups within the party. I'm working with the Friends of Standing Together group, which was set up last year. I'm working with Greens Against Antisemitism, and I am and Jewish Greens, and then I'm part of another group of members, and we all came together. In fact, one of them is here tonight. We all came together knowing each other because we were concerned about the shift that we were seeing in the party 2 years ago. So there are lots of pronged approaches, and I'm now hearing that other groups within the party. So, for example, the Young Greens passed a resolution condemning anti-Semitism last month at their annual meeting. So I think the people who've come in recently and who are causing the problems, a lot of them are pushing it too far. They've been emboldened and they're taking it just that little bit too far, and it's beginning to filter through to other members who are thinking, oh, that's not good. And some of them are actually doing something now, and there's a big push now. So we've tabled some emergency motions that we hope will help, and some amendments to the Standing Orders report that we hope will help either dilute this horrible motion or stop it from being heard. And people are coming forward who aren't Jewish to present those emergency motions and amendments, which is really good. So that does give me hope, but I'm also exhausted. I'm really tired.
I'm not, I mean, Elise, I just think you know, to have the strength and the bravery, just keep going on with all that around you, you know. I mean, I
Because
hope.
I put my life into this party, and these people are not Greens. They are not behaving that way.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it goes the right way, but I'm not
It's
always
like when
very.
you're told when the school bully, when you're
Mm,
told you need to leave the school. No, the bully
mm,
needs to
mm,
leave. You know, it's that
mm,
kind of
mm. I mean, for
Tom
me, I
Jerry.
just found a different arena because I was put in a position where I really had no choice. Um, we've been talking quite a long time. Is there any final questions? Okay, thank you everybody, and thank you so much, Elise. It was really, really interesting to hear about the experiences of the Green Party and what you're facing at the moment. And
I think it's really important that we talk about it more.
I think it is, and it's tough for you to do this a few days before it's going to happen, and the crap you're going to get for it. So thank you very much. Really, really important. And thank everybody for a really good discussion and keeping things respectful because, you know, emotions can get heated in these discussions, but really, really appreciated it. So I'm going to finish now. I think Martin's put a link into about the centre. So do sign up if you're not on our mailing list. Do think about donating because we need the money to keep doing this stuff. And you can also volunteer as well. Have a look on our website. But thank you, everyone. So I shall bring the meeting to a close. Thank you.